And welcome back to Coaching with the Bible. This is episode 99. 99. Those who know. This is the beginning of the fifth book of Moses, the book known in English as Deuteronomy, in Hebrew as Devarim. It is season 2, episode 45, and our topic this week is framing and reframing. The concept of framing something or reframing something, an argument in particular, or an idea or a problem, is something that I deal with a lot in coaching. It is something that all leaders struggle with. In fact, I think most people struggle with in certain situations. And it's an interesting skill set to be able to develop one's ability to reframe an argument or to, establish it from a different perspective. And let's sort of dive in with the following from the Bible itself. As we begin the fifth book of Moses, we shift. We're in the last weeks of the life of Moses. The people are going to be entering into the land, and Moses gets up to speak. And he speaks for a very long time. And what's important to appreciate, and last year we talked about this idea that Moses is shifting in terms of his role at the end of his life, from being the leader who takes them out of the land, to being the leader who takes them to Sinai, to being the leader who navigates the desert with them for 40 years, to now being the leader who hands them off to Joshua as they enter into the land. And he shifts, as we talked about last year, in the frame of an article written by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, into the role of leader as teacher, or teacher as leader, however you want to set that up. He shifts gears. He changes what it is that he's been focused on and now becomes the master teacher for the people of Israel. And so the whole book lays out this thesis and this teaching of Moses for the people. And sort of different from how we want to think about Moses as a teacher, I want to sort of do something slightly different here with you this year. And it's this. If it was simply that Moses was recounting the details of all the things that happened over 40 years, so then he could just simply chronologically go in order and recount everything that happened. Many of the commentaries simply talk about the idea that Moses is now expounding on the Torah, on the Bible, on the commandments, on the precepts that were already taught and those that were not yet taught, and adding details. But I think it's important to appreciate the context, which I think is one way to understand framing, and the frame from which Moses is approaching this presentation to the people. It is not just a restating and a retelling of all that was before. Moses is putting a frame and a direction so that the people can see it a certain way. This is a new generation of people. We've discussed this idea before. This is not the people who left Egypt. These are the children of the people who left Egypt. In many cases, they're not the people who necessarily stood at Sinai, at Mount Sinai. The children of. So they know of. They're one generation removed. They are obviously experiencing Moses and the desert and all of God's blessings that they had in the desert. But if it was simply a retelling, Moses would start at the beginning and talk from the beginning, and he doesn't. He's focused in a very specific direction and mode where he's talking about the move towards the land. So he mentions the story of the spies ever so briefly. He mentions then the mistake that's made with the spies. He mentions the attempt of the people on their own to go up to the land, which also fails miserably. And then he recounts the battles that just took place. They all experienced those. And in there he also mentions the couple of nations that they didn't fight with, the ones that they sought permission from to cross. And in the context of that, important term, he mentions those people as the children of Esav, the children of Lot, that they're family, and they have their place, and we have our place. And it's towards our place that we are going, and it's in the frame of us going into that place, or you going into that place, that I now want to share with you the entire corpus of the Bible. All the commandments, how to build a covenantal society, the term that Rabbi Sachs uses a lot. And so the frame is important. It's not simply a history lesson. It's not simply just a retelling. It's not simply just Moses, living out loud a memoir of his own. There's a frame, there's a direction, there's a purpose. There's a way in which he wants the people to see it and experience it, and not sort of haphazard events that took place, but in a thematic, directed mode from one place to another at the hand of God. And so framing it is very important. And on occasion, reframing it might be even more important. So what do I mean? The ability to frame something, the ability to really put something into the right structure, let's say, is to allow us to understand what's going on in the simplest way possible. What I mean by that is that in our own minds, the way we're able to manage a lot of information or a lot of data or a lot of things that are going on is we create frameworks in our own mind, right? Frameworks. So we're able to sort of see progression, or we're able to sort of appreciate the list of problems or the tasks at hand. We create some sort of a structure that works for us. One could view that structure as soothing to sort of the anxiety that we might feel about not finishing everything. But on the other hand, it's also efficient in that it allows us to work through a lot of information or a lot of tasks over the course of time because we have a framework that works for us. The problem is that sometimes the framework is broken, and sometimes the frame that we've set is misaligned. It simply doesn't work for us. And so we need to reframe. And so what reframing is then is when we replace the existing framework with a new, more functional framework. It's as simple as that, right? It sounds simple, right? There's more complex definitions for it. It's basically looking at things and saying, where in the past saw it as a problem, I now see it as an opportunity. Where in the past something was clearly impossible, now I see it as possible. Reframing something is a very powerful tool. In coaching, it's a very powerful skill set to work with someone or a leader or a team to help them reframe what in fact is going on, to help them really maybe see what is actually happening and not what they think is actually happening. So here, let's take a prime example. You have someone on your team at the office who came in with a head of steam and high recommendations, a lot of talent, they're an expert in their field, what have you. And the boss, this person's boss, is 6 months in and can't figure it out. He's not keeping up with the project. He's not focused on the main component of the team. Can't figure it out. This person has massive references, has a great resume, but on our team, the person is simply not performing. So in a regular framework, if you're simply just asking for advice, someone would just give you the advice. Maybe that person has to move on. Maybe you have to let that person go. That's not enough. In the coaching domain, what we try to do is we try to get the person who's having to think about this, let's say in this case it's this boss, to reframe the decision that they have to make, to wonder whether or not they're asking the right question or solving the right problem in this space, and then perhaps it gets easier. So let's say it's a case like that. Ask the boss or this person, well, how valuable is the work that the person is now contributing to you? It's a different question. It's not about understanding why with respect to the references that the person has and the performance that they have. The why isn't crucial. It's simply what. Is the person performing at all for what you need? It's a simpler question. If the answer is no, then you sort of have solved your situation, right? And so ability to reframe allows the person to come at it from a different perspective. I learned sort of reframing in two dimensions, in two spaces. One, I spent a lot of years studying in yeshiva, and admittedly, it was probably the best training for the concepts of reframing, the ability to hold multiple frameworks or multiple perspectives at the same time while studying Talmudic literature or Jewish law, is the ability to sort of see the opinion, hold that opinion in one hand, leave it for a few minutes, take a lap around the track with someone else's opinion, appreciate all the intricacies and potential situations that brings, and then to sort of do that compare work, it allows you to sort of see it from multiple keyword perspectives and allows you to put on multiple frames to the same picture. I was reading recently an article about reframing art. And there's a whole sort of, science, really, around how one should choose the frame for a piece of art that they hold. And how different frames bring out different colors, or they bring out different aspects or different depth in an image, in a photo, that wasn't there in the old frame. Or perhaps it's the lighting, or putting on different lighting around the picture allows you to reframe how you see the imagery that's in front of you they've been staring at for so long, because you saw it a certain way, and now it's the ability to see it differently. So it's really an important skill set to have. The other context where I learned it was I taught advocacy for a long time, a course on the Middle East conflict and advocacy for in the space of the Middle East conflict. And we would discuss a lot of issues that were at play in the Middle East. And we would work with the students as to how to understand the problem being presented, the issue being presented from a certain perspective, from a certain frame, and then the ability to perhaps put a different frame on the same set of facts, and therefore now have a different different view of it, and perhaps a different outcome. And so that is a very powerful tool. And it's one that I think perhaps we take too lightly, that too often we get stuck in our current frameworks, our current frame of mind. We can't get past it, we can't get beyond it, and then we're stuck. And I do want to differentiate between what some people, and some of you listening might think is, well, he's talking about reframing, he's talking about spin, or it's manipulation. I don't view it as spin or manipulation. I think sometimes it can be spin and sometimes it can be manipulative, when I think that the intention is really not there, or the intention is to excuse a behavior or to, bring a person and change a person from where they are to be on your side. That, I think, is manipulation and spin. I don't think that's what's going on in the Bible. Certainly when Moses is expounding and expanding on the commandments and the stories. And I don't think that's what's happening necessarily in a lot of the situations that you're in. You're legitimately seeking to understand and to solve. And hopefully it's not the case where a person you're working with is trying to spin you a certain way or trying to manipulate you into a certain situation. And so we have to be able to sort of develop this and work on this. And I think one of the easiest ways to do that is to bring someone else into the conversation. This is not just anyone, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a stakeholder in the conversation. It's someone who is perhaps outside the current frame and will allow you to have a different perspective on the same set of facts. And perhaps then, very importantly, we do a lot in the coaching, is the ability to come up with additional or new or different kinds of solutions. Because that's really what you're seeking, is a solution. It might not be the solution to the same problem, because it might be a different problem that you're now exploring. One of the questions that I ask a lot is, are we solving the right problem? Or is this the problem we need to be solving right now? And that often stops people in their tracks to wonder what it is about the problem as they described it, and whether or not they've actually hit on what the problem is. And therefore, maybe the frame is in fact broken from the start. Or to ask an additional question like this, which is, do we have all of the facts that we need to be able to now discuss potential solutions? Are we missing anything? The question I ask a lot in 2 words, what else? What else belongs in here? What other details or facts can we consider here in the space of this problem, in the frame that you've created? But by asking the question of what else, or what other details, or what are we missing here, we're expanding the vision and we're expanding the frame. And it allows us to get to more conclusions, it allows us to get to more solutions. And so we need to sort of appreciate how we can go about reframing, how we can look at a framed situation and come up with a different way to do that and the ability to help other people to be more effective in what it is that they're trying to do. And again, not be in a space where we're trying to manipulate someone or spin someone in a certain direction. So how do we do this? Like, effectively, how do we do this? So I think that the first thing, as I mentioned, is I think the key is really to bring people into the equation who are not there from the beginning. So if you're sitting and studying somewhere and you can't figure it out, so if you were studying for a test, most of the time what you would do is you would ask somebody to join the conversation. You would have a friend join who wasn't there before. Hey, that maybe you know this material. What am I not seeing here in this that maybe can help me figure out where I'm off on this matter, right? Like that really helps people figure it out. That really helps people, get different perspective on the problem that you're trying to solve. So that's the first thing, is to bring in outsiders, bring in additional voices. Don't be, shy around the problem or around your frame or your inability to solve it. Boldness and the courage and the openness and the vulnerability that it takes to get outside it and to bring somebody else in can really help you get there. So the first thing I think is to really bring in outsiders. The second thing is really to ask, do we have all the information that we need to proceed here? I think this is an important thing. If it's a problem that we're trying to solve, so then in that space, ask the question, do we have everything in here that we need to solve the problem that we're trying to solve for? And then ask a different question. Is this in fact the problem that we need to solve right now? Because often what you'll see is that perhaps it's not, or perhaps it's a sub-problem, or it's a symptom of the larger problem that you are now not solving, in fact, because you're focused on the wrong thing. So here, first, again, is bringing in the outside voice, asking for better information. And I do this a lot with you here in Coaching with the Bible, but it really is to practice. Just simply ask, how do you see this situation? How are you seeing this different than how I'm seeing this? Don't run to solutions, because you might find that you're actually trying again to solve for the wrong problem. Recently, I was in a meeting, and team was working through. This team that I was working with was working through a big issue. They had some big issues for their company, and they'd initially zeroed in on one problem. And then as they started to unpack, they realized that that was not the actual problem. The problem was much deeper, much more fundamental, and that if they could solve the more fundamental problem, then the other problems perhaps go away. So by reframing the conversation away from the problem that wasn't actually the problem to a more fundamental, deeper, core issue, it allowed to come up with multiple solutions to be put into place immediately. It allowed for the team to get alignment around it. It allowed for more voices to come into the conversation. And it allowed for this group of people to move forward and to be in a much better position to succeed. So by, again, asking the right questions, bringing additional voices into the conversation, getting people to appreciate from their perspective what they think the problem is or what the issue is, really crucial. And then beginning to consider, what type of problem are we trying to solve? Tag it for what it is. When you begin to do that, and again, these are concepts we've talked about in a lot of different domains in Coaching with the Bible, but this structure really helps you get outside yourself and gets you into a space where the reframing of what's going on is actually going to get you to success. Again, different from spin and manipulation. Those are dangerous, they're inappropriate, they're wrong. And if you're in that situation, you feel like what's happening to you is spin or manipulation, call timeout, ask for a pause, restate what it is you feel the problem here is, and ask the person to come back to where you are on this so that you can get to the right space and to the right situation, the right solution. Moses in the Bible is setting a frame for the people of Israel in the desert in that moment. He's asking them to reframe the events that took place till now. He's putting them into a different context so they can set in motion the covenantal society, the covenantal community. That's on one level. And then on our personal levels, whether again it's on a team or in our homes, to look at the situations, the problems that exist, to bring in those outside voices, to ask if we have all the information that's necessary, to put a tag on it so we can appreciate what problem is it that we're trying to solve, and then ultimately begin to scratch at some of the powerful solutions that you've come at so that you can ultimately get to where you want to be on the other side. When we do all of those things, when we get to all of those spaces, we put ourselves in a position to really succeed and to really become the people and the leaders that we want to be. That is Coaching with the Bible. Do not miss next week's episode, which is episode 100. Take care. Have a good one.